Thank you for coming here today. This is not an official hearing of the Senate Environment Comms Committee. This is a private meeting held by myself, Senator Ross Cadell, and Senator Lee Blythe from South Australia as members, coalition members of the Environment Comms Committee meeting. It is for the purpose of gathering information into the offshore wind inquiry. We have a number of witnesses to come forward that we would have liked to have seen in a more full and thorough process, but this is what we can do. So I'd like to first welcome Alex and Amanda from Illawarra Offshore Wind. If you could come to the table, please. Yeah, these two. Where the mics are, sorry.
These two?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, that's perfect. Oh, yes, thank you.
So I'll start by saying, because this isn't a full meeting of a Senate committee, we're not covered in full by parliamentary privilege. Anything that you have to say that is slightly risky, or we can close down the meeting, we can do offline. If I want to refer to those things, we'll do that. But thank you for coming here today. Sorry we couldn't do better. I'd like to start, first off, we'll follow some simple Senate procedure like we do when we first ask for an introduction. And do you have an opening statement each?
Yes, we do. So I'm Alex O'Brien, President responsible for Future Illawarra, and this is Amanda Delore.
Yeah, from Illawarra.
So we would like, good morning, everyone. Amanda and I are here today to speak for the Illawarra community and our local businesses, because when it comes to the offshore wind project, the Illawarra has been steamrolled by the government regarding the offshore wind proposal. The government's consultation, in our opinion, was not genuine. There were rushed sessions held at difficult times with only 1,200 attendees, while our self-organised grassroots forums reached over 5,000 people. The government gave us half-truths in these consultation sessions, downplaying the high costs and experimental nature of floating offshore wind. They compared the Illawarra project to a fixed-bottom Danish wind farm in a marine area devoid of life. That's nothing like the floating wind turbine proposal in a biodiverse coast. Where was the detail on environmental risks, like the impact to our highly sensitive marine ecosystem, or the massive floating substations that were conveniently left out? Worse, developers were clearly in the room with ministers years before the community had a say. Statements these developers made months before zones were proposed and declared mirrored what the final zone would look like, down to the square kilometres. That, in our opinion, is not a genuine consultation. And our concerns, ignored. 65% of submissions in the Illawarra oppose this project. 77% flagged the environment as their main concern. They highlighted threats to whales, seabirds, yet the project sailed through. We made it clear that we denied social licence for this project. We demanded answers on jobs that included jobs created, but also jobs lost, the impact on our local fishing companies, our bustling tourism industry, the costs of the project, which are still unanswered, and the impact on marine life. We got silenced or dismissed. This isn't just about wind farms, it's about a government that turned out a community screaming to be heard, and simply, we deserve better.
Yes, there's a number of recurrent themes through this. The first one was lack of information. There's still not been a true and accurate picture of how the wind turbines will appear from the shoreline, no models. We've not been given information regarding construction costs, who fund them, who oversee construction. All of those things have remained unanswered. The community fear, a climate of fear has surrounded this proposal. People felt, especially initially, if they spoke out publicly, that they'd lose their jobs, or it'd limit their possibility of promotion, or they'd get a backlash. Speed at the proposal that's been pushed through. How in a few short months were we supposed to inform 330,000 people of what was happening? That is just an impossible task. We found that the role of government and union, there was a lot of union representatives at all of the meetings, and we also found that some of the tactics that they used, we found that they were a bit intimidating. There's been a lack of transparency all the way along, community sessions, negativity and bias in some of the newspaper reporting, and we had false reports that we were, sponsored by coal, or we were sponsored by, Trump supporters, or none of that's true. We've always been a community-based grassroots organisation that just want the best for our community. Irrelevance, our state and federal Labor representatives have made me personally and members of my family and community feel irrelevant, and that our concerns do not matter. A lack of genuine consultation, as was described. We've never really sat down at the table with anyone in government the federal Labor government, that really were interested in answering any of our questions. And I just think I actually, when I put my submission in for this, my big personal statement was this. I put it in from a personal point of view, and I said, what's been the outcome of this for me personally, my family, and those of the community who are genuinely concerned? I have personally, and so have others I know, devoted hundreds of hours to obtaining and sharing information that should have been provided in a proper community consultation process. Time that's taken me away from my family and a very ill husband. Time I cannot get back, and time that should not have been necessary had the consultation process been carried out in a manner that was fair, equitable and inclusive.
You mentioned in that statement that there's been accusations you're funded by coal, you're Trump supporters, these sorts of things. We've heard down here you're all coalition puppets, you're doing this on behalf. How do you react to that? What is your position? Can I get some...
Yeah, well, when we started this, we were open to invite we had our first rally, and we invited any politicians that were willing to come. It was open to anyone. And we had quite a few politicians from, different sides of the government, except the Labor Party, of course, who did not attend. And the whole reasoning was we were apolitical, but we're prepared to support those that are against this project, because that's the only way we believe that this will be dismissed.
Sorry, can I just add to that? It's fair to say that across the community, this isn't political. This is people of all persuasions across your communities that are opposed to this. It's not...
Yes, no.
And look, we've got members that are long-term traditional Labor supporters, Greens supporters. We get helped from people within the Labor Party who oppose this project as well, and are not happy with the direction that the Albanese government is heading in.
Now, when I was down there, one of the things that concerned me, they took out some radio ads on community radio. For the first consultation, there was a very limited advertising process. But what I heard anecdotally, they were advertised that day for a 5 o'clock meeting. Is that true? Is that what we understand to be? The first consultation was a 5 o'clock meeting when people were still just finishing work?
Yeah, look.
Yes, it was actually. Yeah, because I was at that first meeting.
Yep.
The one that was at Bulli,
Yep.
and I went armed with a whole list of questions. My husband and I. Not one person could answer any of them. They handed out information. There were union representatives there who were there obviously because they thought it would help the job industry. But there was no engineers, no environmental representatives of any kind. So what it was really like, as was stated earlier, an advertising campaign. And it was, here it is, there it goes.
And there was a general lack of awareness about the actual consultation taking place. So a number of our community members had not received the pamphlets. Myself, I wasn't aware of the community sessions at times that they chose as well. Were not necessarily convenient for people, who commute into Sydney, like myself, and 20 other thousand people in the Illawarra. Those who are carers, teachers, so the times were just not suitable. And they were rapid fire community sessions. So shortly after the announcement, 5 or 6 sessions were held, and it was not an adequate amount of time for the community to fully understand the project, but nor was a panel that they put together. You cannot put a panel together that has no environmental experts, no engineers, no energy experts. You cannot throw in a union representative who has wanted this project for 15 years in the hope of Illawarra steel, being used to make the turbines. You cannot throw in a local Labor member where there are concerns about the trip that she took to Denmark that was paid for by the Danish embassy, where she took 2 staffers as well on that trip. And you cannot throw in a university student on a panel. So when you also throw a First Nations representative who was absolutely scathing of offshore wind when it was first proposed, as reported by James Willis in the Daily Telegraph, and then you find out through a Freedom of Information request that Minister Tanya Plibersek requested a couple of days before Jodie Edwards was on the panel where her grant was up to. And then a few months later, Jodie Edwards received a $300,000 grant. And so questions like that need to be raised so we have transparency and accountability if it has been seen that the government did not undertake this consultation with genuine intent.
And can I also add to that, even to know that this project was going ahead, I found out through a letterbox drop from the government that only went to the main streets. So
Sorry?
it only went to a lot of the main streets. So there were people that never even received the original pamphlet from the government to say that this project was going ahead. So, yeah.
So it wasn't Australia Post, it was local deliveries?
I think it must have been a local delivery,
Yeah.
but as far as I
There
know,
are a number.
there are, and as far as the and the pamphlets to advertise, which advertised all of these, as Alex said, he never received them. And I've spoken to people in the community who, if you lived off the main streets, you never received any information about this. So
You mentioned just then that the consultation panel had no environmentalists, no engineers, no energy experts. Is that correct?
yes,
Look, yeah, so I think there was in some, just to clarify, there was Ty Christopher, I believe, on some of them. But again, I suppose what we've found through this, you can have engineers and energy experts of various degrees, but he was not inadequate. He was there representing the University of Wollongong, who has lost $90 million in the 23 financial year, and potentially see this project as helping maybe resolve some of those issues. But there was what we feel the panel had a number of conflicts of interest. This was not a genuinely independent panel for the various reasons that we've outlined in terms of union representation, a local Labor MP, and a university representative, and potentially a First Nations representative who received a grant shortly after.
Just going a bit more on that, when you sit there and you go to the consultation process, some letterboxing, there was some advertising, I understand a panel that was there. You mentioned you've raised, I think, more than 5,000 people to your grassroots.
Just at the events that we held, community sessions. Yep.
How many do you think attended the government ones?
About 1,200.
Right, okay.
And how many residents in total would you like?
there's about,
impacted?
I think there's 330,000.
That's what I thought I
Around
heard you say.
that.
So
About
330,000 and the government got 1,200.
And that's why we called for re-engagement on the consultation to allow more people. And look, floating offshore wind, there's only 25 turbines in the world. So this is a complex project proposal to throw 200, 300 off our coast, which is much deeper water at a much larger size. It's clear even the experts that the government had were not fully aware, nor were the developers of what was involved. And that's why 7 developers have pulled away from the Illawarra project. And Blue Float, for whatever reason, is stalling at the moment. But only 1,200. I would just clarify, we had 5,000 attend a number of community sessions, but we still had about 35,000 people in the Illawarra signed petitions. We had about 11,000 people who put a submission to oppose the project, which was double all regions combined in Australia. And we've held a number of rallies and the like. So there is a huge amount of the community that would have loved to attend a community consultation.
And unfortunately, we felt it necessary to do that ourselves to tell people, because the information coming up from the government was so scant that we ended up doing, community meetings all the way from Coaldale all the way down to Kiama ourselves, and have had 2 rallies to let people in the community know that this is happening to them, because it's really being kept a secret.
Yeah.
And that's all been done grassroots, I'm guessing.
Grassroots.
You're fundraising, you're funding it yourselves.
All
Yes.
of it ourselves.
Without big government
With
behind you.
That's
with
right.
Paying for radio ads.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Have you done a
nothing.
Bunnings sausage sizzle?
No, apparently we're not allowed to.
Yeah, that's right too. Yeah, we're not allowed to do that. Yeah. So no, it's all. And the only funding we've had is from pass the bucket around at meetings, or a few small local businesses have put some money into.
Right, so
help
it's
us
very organic,
It's
very
very
community-based. These are
grassroots.
people that are concerned genuinely
Yes,
about
they are.
what you could characterise as completely experimental. This
Yep.
hasn't been done anywhere in the world.
Not
You-
on this scale.
You
no.
don't know what impact this will have on your environment,
No.
what it will look like from the shore.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
right.
and the problem is too, I know they've been putting them in New Jersey and off the coast of New Jersey, and they're ahead of us in all of this development. Well, they're starting to get some data come through now, and one of the things that happened at Nantucket, one of the blades broke off. This is one blade, and it was 6 beaches, I think, that were closed for weeks on end while they cleaned the debris. There's going to be up to 600 blades out there.
Yeah.
So imagine the impact if we have a storm like we're having now that comes down the coast. What's the impact on our local environment and our beaches?
And that'll
coastline?
have not only an impact on Illawarra tourism, but also you're talking about Cronulla and the eastern suburbs, because when Minister Bowen declared the zone, he actually pushed it further north, potentially for an access point to Sydney. And therefore, if you're thinking about the tourism in those areas, it'd be absolutely devastating for turbine failure to impact the
Not to
beaches.
mention migratory birds that are off
that's-
the coast. Like you're talking huge
Yes.
blades in a space that
Well, it was interesting. We were Blue Float. They released their environmental proposal early in the middle of our consultation period. I don't know if you know about that. Well, they quickly withdrew it, but it gave us a chance to look at it. And in it was listed, I think there was 100 endangered species of bird life and sea life that they said would be impacted, and that's from their own submission.
So when you've got 77% of your respondents citing environment as a major concern of this thing, and the proponent says 100 endangered species, has that had any influence on the locals? Has it changed the campaign, or are we all just shutting up and pretending it doesn't exist?
Yeah, look, I think the battle that we have is there's not many conservation groups in Australia that aren't funded by wind farm and solar farm developers, and that's the reality of it. So there is one conservation group, Rainforest Reserves Australia, that is fighting this battle, and they have led an incredible amount of research and seen a number of wind farms actually shut down now on concerns about migratory birds. So that is the battle that we have as a small grassroots organisation that is well supported by our community. That is the battle that we are having. But it's definitely a core issue for our community.
I know we've got to move on other witnesses soon, but just quickly, specifically, you have a big seafood industry off there. Was there specific consultation around industry and that sort of thing going on at all? Was there specific around it?
No,
Not at all.
What we've talked to commercial fishermen and also, game fishermen, and even if you look at the City Fish Market submission, you'll find it pretty clear that they were not, really consulted with this project. And there's, if you think about, climate change and, the impact of the types of, meats that they talk about, seafood actually has the lowest carbon footprint. So to put at risk our seafood industry, to put at risk a $700 million development at the Sydney Fish Markets, and to not have local New South Wales fishing supply would be pretty devastating if this project went ahead.
So I was going to say, so fair to say that while this project might create jobs in building it, it could actually have a much more severe economic impact on your fishing industry. So that
And-
people could,
Yeah.
just as many people could actually lose their livelihoods and a food source.
And that's a guarantee. So when
Yeah.
we've talked to those fishing businesses, that's lost staff because the zone is where they fish. But it's also the tourism. Tourism employs 5 times steelworks. There's 15,000 employed.
Yeah, okay.
We know from the US have seen a 15% decline in terms of tourists coming down to those areas. So that's a $2 billion industry. And that is only growing because of the expansion of Sydney, the Shell Harbour airport upgrade, the hotels that are being built. So there's a lot that the Illawarra has staked on its tourism industry to find a new way forward when steelworks shut down from 40,000 employees to only 3,000 today.
And can I say too, regarding the employment, you might have a lot of initial workers there for construction, but the skills required will probably require a lot of overseas people as well. And then where do we house all the people coming to do the construction when we're having difficulties with housing in the area as it is? So it brings in all those other questions. And finally, we heard from, BlueScope themselves, the team to eventually maintain them is quite small once they're constructed. So it's not really something that you're looking at long-term employment. So all of those things considered really make this not a viable.
And that's it. If we're subsidising what our engineers believe to be $5 billion of taxpayer funds per annum, is it really worth the job losses and a promise of maybe 300, 500 ongoing jobs when we're going to lose, our local businesses in the fishing and tourism industry?
And I was going to say, and I think the big question, if we're talking economics, is this going to make everyone's power prices cheaper? Which is what the Labor government promised everyone, didn't they?
We don't even know.
And I think this is going to see it.
Well,
I think it's
don't know
fair
what
to
the power's
say
going.
experience is going to show us that power prices will go up
And
as
look
a
at
result of projects like
BlueScope's
this.
CEO recently was on with Ross Greenwood on Sky talking about the energy transition.
Yep.
Now, energy in Australia for them is 50% more expensive, or up to 50% more expensive than the US. They are saying the energy transition is not only not working, but it is getting worse. So if BlueScope are saying that, then you're going to propose the most expensive form of energy, which is floating offshore wind, to produce green hydrogen, which is not commercially viable. That's just not going to work for steel and manufacturing in this country.
No, and it seems like it's ideological sort of in terms of what it's wanting to achieve, but that is going to come at a huge economic cost, and it's communities like yours and the taxpayer that are going to foot the bill for that.
Yeah.
And can I just say, the bottom line is no one has really been able to tell us how much of that power is earmarked for homes. So it will change the whole face and structure of a big community, and how much benefit will they actually receive out of it?
You get to pay more for your power prices.
That's it.
You mentioned that 7 groups have walked away from the zone. What is the current status of you? Obviously, it was a happening on Friday. Then another one walked away. Where is it now? What's the status?
Well, look, it seems that the developer Blue Float has asked the government to pause the issuing of feasibility licence. We don't quite understand why that would be the case. The minister has blamed it on the coalition for making it a very political issue down there. But from what we understand, there is no reason the minister cannot issue a licence, and the developer, depending on the outcome of the election, can either decide to sign that or not. So the reasons the minister has provided do not stack up, and we want some answers from the developer as to what's actually going on. Are they walking away? And if they are, let's have that upfront conversation before the election. Thank you.
Thank you for the
Thanks for
opportunity
your
to
time.
speak and hearing us. So thank you. Thanks so much.
These communities are using money anyway to ensure that their businesses are.
Now, Mark Nichep and Susan Taylor-Rees from Western Australia.
The formal inquiry into offshore wind was supposed to be open today, but it was cancelled at the last minute. These communities are using companies anyway to ensure that their voices are heard.
Thank you, Mr. Constellari, for attending. This is not an official hearing of the Economic and Environment Communications Committee. So I have to warn us, you are not covered by full parliamentary privilege. If there's anything that you wish to say that is a little bit contentious, we're happy to close the meeting and stop broadcasting and have a private discussion. And we may, if we think to bring that up in evidence or something later. The purpose of this is to gather information for our inquiry. So that is why we're here. And I'd just like to say, you have Senator Lee Blythe with me. I'm Senator Cadell, and my Chief of Staff is acting secretary for the moment. So do you have an opening statement that you'd like to say that we can take in evidence?
More than anything, I think that coming over from WA, we had to crowdfund to be here.
Wow.
Having to ask for money from the public was quite confronting because we had such little notice. And I think that this is, again, part of this due process that should have happened in a way that was much more professional, to be perfectly honest, let alone more accountable. So in Western Australia, our feasibility licences haven't been announced, but of course we have our state election this weekend. So we're anticipating that will happen very soon after the state election, once the Labor government has ensured that they're not causing any more ruckus over in WA. Because if they had have announced the feasibility licences along with the Hunter and Warrnambool, then probably things would be very, very different right now, which is, again, a form of like manipulation and not being transparent in these processes at all. So as far as we're concerned, the entire process for the consultation that happened in WA, I attended 5, there were 6. And at no point could I say I came up with one answer that would give me a base data or some foundation of what was planned. It was all conceptual, and there was not one person that had even stepped foot in Western Australia apart from one. So all of the representatives from the Department of Climate Change, Energy and Water had never been in Western Australia previously apart from one, which tells me that they are so out of touch with what's going on in Western Australia and what was applicable to our region and area.
Ms. Taylor-Rees, do you have any opening statements?
Yeah, thanks for your time. We're just a community that wants answers, basically, that we've not been given. I also attended 5 consultation sessions out of the 6. And I had to attend all 5 of them because my questions weren't answered. I kept asking the same questions and no one would give me answers. I'd get sent to another person. And this is the resounding story all around Australia. Community wants answers. This is a new technology, never before in Australian waters. We need to get the information so the communities can make informed decisions, and it's actively being withheld. Well, that's what the feeling is in the community. We've got fishing industries, we've got tourism industries, and the community at large, and we're all searching for answers, and they're just being blocked from us.
You mentioned this search for answers. You've got a bunch of people coming over from other states to Western Australia that aren't necessarily, we heard the previous witness talk about not a lot of answers in the environmental space, in the engineering space. You've had to not be answered anymore because you've asked the same question without getting answers 5 times. Was the consultation, your view, just to tick the box to say we've done it rather than to perform any sort of community, get a social licence or get community backing for it?
It was 100%, it felt like a tick the box, but even more than that, it actually felt like an advertorial for the wind industry. We felt like it was a promotional event put on and almost sponsored by the wind industry. They had invited proponents that actually attend and mingled with the public and made out as though they were public members. Yeah,
Sorry, they didn't disclose who they were.
No, they were walking around without badges. I asked quite a few people what they were doing there, and there were people that had been invited to attend because they were going to be doing possibly environmental studies on future work, should it go ahead. It just felt extremely deceptive. You didn't know who you were talking to. If you did go and ask questions, 9 times out of 10, they never gave you an answer and they directed you to someone else, and you had to go and line up and wait behind others asking the same questions, only to be sent to another area. It was just, and as Martine said, The environmental panel that was there to answer questions weren't even from WA.
Yeah.
So
And they were going off data sets that were actually outdated for a start. When I asked where their data sets came from, I said they were about the 2020, 2021. And I said, so you haven't even engaged with local community or experts to get the most up-to-date data, which there would have been a lot because there are a lot of local and regional researchers in that area, especially for our cetaceans, whale protection, as well as even the Department of the DPAW, which is the Department of Parks and Wildlife.
Yep.
They always have base data that they would have been able to provide that's really current, but unfortunately there wasn't any. When I asked a few simple questions about, what kind of endemic species are you aware of here in our very unique environment here, because we have a what's called a lineal limestone reef system that runs along the coastline all the way from just the other side of Cape Naturalist all the way up to the back of Perth in Rottnest. So what we're looking at here is when we asked these questions, they didn't know what the rock lobster industry were. They didn't know who the endemic jewfish was. They didn't know anything about the reef systems that were off there. I said, had any of them ever looked at any footage under the water? What we're looking at here as far as our very unique marine system. The thing is that it does make it very different because on western seaboards, there's not ever usually a coral reef system. Because we have the Lewin Current, it makes it very, very unique. And because of that, we have the most rare and endangered species that you can imagine because they're only found in this region. So it's a biodiversity hotspot. So Tanya Plebisek has been MIA in this whole discussion completely. We have tried to get answers, even in my submission and in letters. I addressed it to her department as well, but we only got a response from the Mr. Bowen's office, really. So, which is really disheartening because it seems to be that the words of sustainability, protection of habitat, and protection of biodiversity have all gone out the window for this overarching agenda where we have to hit the climate change hysteria. We've got to put in industry that's going to save us, even though we're going to be causing devastating and irreparable damage.
You mentioned this reef system. It's I'm a New South Welshman. I'm not overly familiar with that. That was information to me.
Mm-hmm.
So you've written to the Environment Minister's office about the reef system and the species there and not got feedback at all on that?
We spoke to everyone that was there that was supposed to be their experts, and they had no idea what they were talking about. We had a young gentleman who, bless his, in some way I felt sorry for some of the representatives that were sent over. I said, you guys were lambs to the slaughter, and that was because they were not given the correct information to go and represent what was being planned. And when we asked the questions that they did, they were so misinformed and they had no idea what they were talking about.
They kept apologising. They just kept saying sorry all the time to us.
Do you think, and I'll go back, do you think they were sent people without the information so they couldn't give answers?
Both. I
Possibly.
think it was both, yes.
Possibly.
I think that was quite an intentional thing to make sure that they couldn't give too much information. The thing that's more just concerning about it, those people that were the experts were the University of Western Australia that has received millions of funding from the Department of Climate Change, Energy and Water. So they have been supporting the offshore wind turbine industry and saying that they're trying to be an objective, unbiased, scientific, sounding board, I guess, but it's just an echo chamber for Mr. Bowen, his agenda, because a lot of the research they're doing at the UWA that we could see that funding is going towards is actually directly for the wind turbine industry itself. So it's offshore that they're researching and doing it for to put into our waters. That's not unbiased. That's not doing your due diligence in what environmental impact assessment should be.
Absolutely. And I'm sort of a bit flabbergasted at that there is, and WA is beautiful. I'm very lucky I've got relatives that live there. So it sort of astounds me that experts aren't looking at what the environmental impact would be off of your shores when we are doing this for ideological reasons for the environment. It sort of seems like you're going to take from one side and destroy something on the other. Is it fair to say that the community is also aware of all of this? And I guess in terms of backlash, was the consultation process wide enough that you've had, enough of the community knowing about it?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
The consultation process is, I'm going to describe exactly what it was.
Yeah, sure.
So the first one that I turned up was the first session in Bunbury, which was started at 12 30, and I think it was the 19th. So we had 19th, 20th and 21st of March last year. So I turned up to the first one, and as soon as I looked at the front door, there were 2 people on either side interrogating people before they went in, what do you want to know? That is not an open forum. What you're doing is already intimidating people at the front door and making them feel on the spot because they don't even have questions yet. A lot of people
coming there
a
to
lot of
get
people
information. Yeah. Yeah.
And instead of being a Q&A, which happened the day before, that descended into chaos at the binning up, recreation, fishing, I think you probably heard about that where, yes. It escalated into disorder because they put people in there acting as if they were experts, talking to third, fourth, fifth generational expert fishermen that had already been locked out of their oceans because of declining stocks, and they made it sure that the changes were about sustainability for that area. So what it was is that they were saying, oh, we're going to do this. And they're like, are you kidding? You know, that's why it escalated. So now they changed it. So instead of sticking to a Q&A where they could have an open source conversation, everyone was going to have a microphone available to them. So there would be one question with one answer. People that had hearing issues could actually participate. People that had mobility issues that couldn't even navigate the room because it was so packed. That's how many people turned up. We estimate over 700. We think there were more.
So many people left though because there was no seating. They couldn't be heard. Elderly people just could not hear. There was so much noise. It was ridiculous.
So I'm not embarrassed to say that I saw it absolutely descending into chaos, people getting very angry. I just gravitate towards elderly people. I don't know what it is. It's a gift, I think. But a couple of elderly people came up and I was saying, they're like, I can't hear a thing. How are we supposed to get answers when they're telling us to go here and go there? And we're all huddled in together and I can't hear what's going on. My hearing aids are like having feedback. All I want to do is have transparency of listening to what other people have to say. Then I might be able to form a question for myself that then I'm like, well, I've heard this information. That makes me want to ask this. That is what a consultation process should be.
And I'll just interrupt there. When we say that it was not genuine and it felt contrived, there were large montages all around the room of what they believe it may look like on our Geograph Bay. Those montages were totally missing any of the substations that are required in any wind turbine industry.
An important part of an offshore.
Exactly, and they are
A little bit.
they are actually rather massive, and they are closest into land as well. They were missing in all the montages, and I questioned at length, and it took quite a long time, and I had to go to several different people. Why haven't you put the substations in? This is not an honest depiction of what we will see here. And if you haven't done any homework on the industry, you wouldn't even know that. And the response I got after quite a bit of interrogation was it was a considered decision not to include them in the imagery because they didn't present well.
No.
So
In writing?
they said that to
Verbally,
me
we were there,
verbally
yeah.
because I kept questioning, why haven't you put these on the images?
Can you read
Because
that
let's
again?
face it,
Sorry, can you
images.
read that again?
Yep.
What?
I was told in person it was a considered decision not to include them in the imagery because they didn't present
Present well.
well. And that's when I went, oh, they don't present well. So we're coming to this information session, a consultation to get feedback as a community of how this is going to impact our lives, where we live every day, and you're not being honest right from the get-go. These are big glossy photos with tiny little turbines way in the distance, which even that is it's
Misrepresentation
it's
again.
total misrepresentation. But to then not include the substations and be so upfront as to say, yeah, they didn't present well, so we're not going to include them. That is misleading the public, I feel, and so did a lot of other people.
Maybe that's why they didn't give you the information, because that didn't present well either.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Going
Well,
back
it
to
does make you wonder, doesn't it? Because then you start to question the whole process. What is actually honest in this? What are we being fed?
So going back to, I just wanted to finish what we were talking about, how there were so many people with various needs to be part of what you would call a community consultation. There were people with mobility issues, there were people with hearing disabilities, all kinds of things that were excluded because there wasn't enough seating and the noise was so loud. So I took it upon myself, because a number of the older ones said, this is disgraceful. You know, I'm 80 years old and I wrote a list. And so I said, you know what? Okay, so I hopped up on a chair and I knocked on the door and I said, excuse me. And we had a cast of vote, and the entire room voted in front of the Department of Climate Change, Energy and Water. They wanted the Q&A restored to what it was, and they were promised. They wanted a microphone where there was one question and one answer being told at one time, so everyone could be on the same level of awareness at the same time. Then we would be able to have some discord that was positive. They refused that. As I left the room, the offshore infrastructure regulator came and followed me out and said, it didn't go well, we should have had a mediator. And I said, I'm more than happy to mediate if you like at the second session. I said, I think having someone who's a local and is probably known a little bit of what we're here to do is to have a constructive dialogue. They promised that they would change it to a Q&A, that we would have a microphone. And when we turned up to the next session, they went back on that, and both the DCCEW and the offshore regulator said no, they won't be returning back to a Q&A, and then denied they even had that conversation. Like when I say, when we talk about total disregard, so actually denying a handshake and the agreement, I have statutory declarations here for people that couldn't testify today that were going to
Would you be willing to table those?
Yes, we have all of these copies for you. And so this is where the breakdown with community escalated to a point where by the second session, it was just people absolutely furious.
So can I ask though, that those sessions, if they weren't Q&A and you had pictures that weren't actually representative of truth, what were you being told in those sessions?
Pretty much refer back to the website.
Okay.
Was what it was. They had some handouts that said, oh, we'll be updating the website. And it's like, that's not good enough. How tall are they going to be? Where are they going to be manufactured? What are the blades going to be made of?
So they
None.
weren't even giving you that basic level
No,
of
zero
information.
They just kept, like I said, the amount of times I was told, yeah, sorry, haven't got that information, sorry.
So if I can get this, it sort of boggles my mind, and I am sort of, a few weeks into this. So the department sent a whole lot of people that have never been to WA before,
Apart from one,
at
correct.
incredible expense to the taxpayer, to engage with community, that they then cancelled that engagement essentially to give it just as we're going to give you information, but then didn't actually give the community any information either.
That's correct.
And then cancel the inquiry that was going to actually
And then
inquire
that we
into
were
what
going to
happened.
inquire into
So-
what went wrong.
So when you talk about steamrolled and
Correct.
stonewalled, I would say that in WA we had that all the way. When I turned up to the next day, I was told that if I was disruptive at all, I'd be asked to leave, which I don't believe I was disruptive. All I was trying to do was give the community a voice again, where it's like, do we want to return to a Q&A? Unanimously, it was voted. They were told everyone wanted a Q&A. We went to the next session. There was hundreds. So the first session was 700 to 800. In the second session, about the same. And then we went down to Bustleton. There was over 700 people. People got turned away because the venue was far too small, I think by design, because they wanted to control the people going in and out to the breakout centres areas. And this is where people got so angry and fed up and just left and walked away because they couldn't even get in to have any questions answered at all because there wasn't a venue big enough.
Wow. So it's fair to say this really wasn't about community engagement.
No.
This is just ticking a box to say, well,
Promoting the wind turbine
we've
industry.
done a minimum requirement.
At the final session held in Mandurah I went to, and I went to 5 of those so I could try and get more information to gain, and I was told, oh, not you again, I'm not speaking to you.
No.
And I said, I've come here because you're not answering my questions. And they literally turned their back on me and walked away. The only person that would talk to me at that meeting was Owen Wilson, who was in charge of that. And I literally sat down with him, and that's when I was finally getting some detail. But the average person would not do that. They don't have the time to go to 5 community sessions, and they don't have the tenacity to, and if you haven't done your homework, you don't even know what questions to ask, because I had to ask the same question 5 times in numerous different ways to even get anywhere. it's just,
So were they giving you information at least to say, we don't think there'll be environmental impact, or we just haven't
No.
done that yet?
they haven't done that yet. That
Oh,
will,
they haven't
that
got
will
to
come.
that bit
That will
yet.
come
That
later.
comes
Actually, in the
later.
environmental
Yeah,
stage,
okay.
the
They did
amount of
just-
time they always said, "Oh, we're not up to that stage yet." That will be coming in the environmental studies.
They did disclose that the proponents are the ones who will be doing the environmental impact assessment, which to me is abhorrent, because you don't even put a new industry in an environment that you don't even know you're dealing with. If you're not even aware of what's in that ocean and the impact it's going to be as a new industry, one, there should be a precautionary principle, and two, you do the environmental impact before an industry should even be released into this country.
So fair to say, like New South Wales, this is highly experimental, what they're proposing to do.
Absolutely.
No one knows what the economic or environmental impacts will be to it. And we're going to risk a whole, and this is tourism, it's commercial fishing, it's recreational fishers, it's people who just want to be able to go and enjoy the beach and live in these communities and look out and go, that is, and I think that's one thing about Australia is people all around the world envy us because we have the most pristine, beautiful landscapes
And beaches.
that you can imagine.
And southwest of WA is a biodiversity hotspot.
It's stunning.
There's very few of those in the world. We are a biodiversity hotspot.
and people come from all over the world
exactly.
to see it, and that's
And Bunbury
amazing.
has a dolphin visitors centre where last weekend, Sunday, I was swimming with dolphins on the beach where they want to put these things. I was swimming with dolphins.
Yeah.
It's too much to risk. It's just
And for experimental power,
Exactly.
is going to make everyone's power prices
And I
probably
think
more expensive.
I think everyone has to acknowledge that Labor signed up to the Global Offshore Wind Alliance, GOA, and we are taking directions from the other side of the world who has vested interests in this. And that is why all around Australia, communities are up in arms because we are taking instruction and direction from the other side of the world on what we do in Australian waters. That is criminal. Our government is selling us out. Our waters should be protected.
Foreign policies.
This is industrialising our waters from the other side of the world. Do you think Denmark cares about our rock lobster industry, about our fishing industry, about coral that's in WA? They don't care. They have vested interest. Denmark is the hotspot for making money off the wind turbine industry. It's bad enough on land, and we've learned that it's not successful there. Now they want to come and ruin our marine environment. The community's saying no. It's just way too risky.
Knowing we've got to move on, just similar question to the last one. Were you aware of any specific consultation with the fishing industry or the tourism industry, or that was not done at all?
No. So what I took as a campaign coordinator, the first thing, I've been involved in this a little bit before, so I was able to identify, because I studied marine science and this was my jam. I knew straight away the rock lobster industry, the professional fisheries. We have a most sustainable fisheries in the world. We also have an octopus fisheries that won a sustainability award last year. It's all in this area that's absolutely under threat. So what you don't realise is when you're talking to a group of people, they don't even comprehend how the rock lobster industry exists. And if you destroy this limestone reef system, the rock lobster are going to disappear. That's just from disruption of the physical habitat. That's without the underwater cables and that they cause EMF and failure for larvae to hatch, and deformities. They actually cause paralysis as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, can we have Ben Abbott from Port Stephens? Well, welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Senator Cadell.
The
Senator Blythe.
same warning as the other ones. This is not an official meeting of the Environment and Communications thing, so therefore it's not covered fully by parliamentary privilege, although you are giving information to assist us with our deliberations on that inquiry. So there is some little protection there if required. But if you have anything controversial to say, we can close the meeting down and have a private session if that's close that down. So do you have an opening statement, Mr. Abbott?
Yes, I do.
Can we-
So, put on the spot there, but I definitely do. Port Stephens as a community, as a bunch of people, as a culture, as a coastal way of life, has been thrown under the bus by all of this. I'm down here today to give evidence in an actual inquiry that's been worked on by a lot of people, a number of submissions and many hours put into it because we oppose it. But just opposing it's not good enough. People have come up with evidence. People have put their time in to understand the scale of this project and to be able to come up with many points to point in the direction that it's the wrong thing to do. And as we've heard from people before me, we've been stonewalled. We've been pushed under the rug after the rug's been pulled out from underneath us. And that was the purpose I'm here. And I'm more than happy to provide as much information as possible around the process or lack thereof.
Thanks. So Port Stephens in my backyard, coming from the Hunter Valley. It just won, is it Coastal Town of the Year or
No, Town of the Year
Town
Australia.
of the Year.
What if Town of the Year Australia?
So we've gone and done that. I'm sure the people at Illawarra and West Australia are saying you got it on a false pretense, but it did win that. I've climbed Mount Tomaree many times, and I've said to people at the top of it, how would you like to see 200 wind towers off the edge? And they know nothing about it, even locals. Was the consultation good enough in Port Stephens?
So just to be clear, I wasn't aware of any consultation at all. I became aware of what's supposed to be a consultation period after that time. There was apparently 2 sessions in the whole of Port Stephens that were run through the week. Two in working hours with very little, if not zero, notice to local residents and very little notice anywhere else. Apparently there was some flyers handed out or put into letterbox drops, and the anecdotal evidence is that apparently there was thousands of them found in a bin somewhere over near Karora. So that was ineffective. There was no measurables. There was no tracking of that. But I certainly didn't receive a brochure in my mailbox. I certainly didn't receive a letter. So in contrast to that, someone wanted to put a granny flat behind their house 2 streets away from me. I had 2 letters. I had a brochure. It was gazetted in the local paper, and it was on display for 60 days. I think it was 60 or 30 days at council. We knew all about it. We knew what it was. But the scale of this thing being multi-billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and turbines and unproven science, want to put it off at the coast where we are, and nobody knew anything. So Chris Bowen said he went on the television and announced it. My question is, who under the age of 60 watches television anymore, watches the news? And that's not having a go at anyone over 60, but I surely don't. And I guarantee you most people here don't sit down at the 6 o'clock news and watch it either.
I've been to one of your own lectures, like the other groups here, you've run your own processes and stuff like that, where one of the most interesting thing was the migratory seabirds that specifically come into Port Stephens. Was that supplied by the Department of the Industry, or your organisation had to come up with all that research?
No, thank you for your question. There's been nothing given to us by the department whatsoever. We've come up with everything. We've done our own research. There's been numerous people on board. They didn't even know. So when Chris Bowen came up to meet us after we'd made a whole heap of noise and knocking on the door of the local MP, Merrill Swanson, he wasn't even aware that we had one of the most prolific game fishing zones in the whole of Australia sitting completely within the zone that they had put there. Okay, so let alone the Gould's Petrel, which is now taken off the endangered list. Okay, I believe it's critical or it's threatened. Okay, they've built their numbers up for the last 50 years, taken numerous measures, spent hundreds of millions of dollars to try to get them to where they are. They're a migratory bird. They only nest on 2 islands in the whole world. They come in from all directions, and they don't typically fly low, but they will fly low. Okay, typically, sorry, but they also come in at height as well. When they're coming in looking for food, they'll come in from a height. So, and they mate with one mate for their whole life, and it's general estimates from one of the guys who has a particular interest in the Gorge Petrel that's with us, estimated that within 10 years, if you have a loss of one life of a bird per year coming in and one bird going out, within 10 years, they will be extinct.
Wow.
But none of that information was given. The understanding I have, the information sessions the consultation sessions that were run in the area, which nobody knew about, is that when people went in, I think there was only about 16 or 18 people attended. Forgive me for not knowing those exact numbers, but I know it was less than 20 out of those 2 sessions, maybe even less than that. They were divided and pulled aside and people tried to have a chat. I'm not aware that anybody had any substantial information. What I do know, there was one photo of a map handed to them of a zone on an ocean, and that was it. There was no indication of how many, how big they are, where the power lines come ashore, that they are even actually floating turbines,
Right.
which are what we believe is an unproven science, especially in a wild migratory corridor.
You, with all of this going forward, we've heard, and the question I've asked the other two, was there specific consultation with industry? I know you mentioned game fishing. There is a fishing industry. There is a big tourism industry. Did they have specific consultations that you're aware of at all, or have you spoke to them yourselves? What
Not within our area. So the only consultation I'm remotely aware of is there was a small meeting with some professional fishermen and down in Newcastle.
Right.
That's the only thing that I'm aware of. And I don't know who met with them either.
Yeah, the process going forward, we've got the stages. We've got one that's got an abeyance whether it'll go ahead and people pulling out. We've got one that's waiting for a state election to be announced before they say who's going to get it. You had some activity on Friday. What's the status of your zone?
Yeah, so we feel it's very, very sneaky that Chris Bowens announced that they're offered Nova Castor Wind a feasibility licence on a Friday afternoon on what was perceived the eve of an election announcement. Kicking the guts as it's been banded around. So that's the word on the street at the moment is that these licenses won't be done until after the election. So there's some conjecture around that. But we don't know. We don't know. That's just the word on the street at the moment, but we hear all sorts of things.
So, and I guess the whole point of trying to get an inquiry up was to see what the consultation process looked like across the board. And it seems to me that it's been inconsistent to say...
Or non-existent.
Or non-existent in your case. So we've got some where we've got glossy pictures and people to give no information. And then we've got no consultation at all. I guess it's how are you getting the community to be aware of this? Because I guess the guys in WA, you've had hundreds of people show up to be ignored and basically shunted out of venues. How are you communicating with your community to let them know what's happening when there isn't even really a consultation process at all happening?
Yeah, so Facebook.
Yeah, okay.
Community market stalls,
Yep.
community meetings.
Yep.
We had a rally with, I reckon, over 3,000 people. Estimates put around 3,000 people.
Yep.
Some media outlets that I won't mention here said there might have been 500 people. It was well up there. So we've put a lot of effort into actually getting some word out there. We've put up some signs. We're putting T-shirts around, bumper stickers and so on and so forth. We get out at every opportunity that we can actually get out and we talk to people. I mean, you've got to remember, we've had a fair engagement with people. So every venue that we've had has been absolutely packed.
Okay.
Anytime with something new, you've got to remember, out of this 9-point plan that Chris Bowen's tabled, which must I say, let me say that when he actually came and met with us, we were given two things. We were given a 9-point plan with very little detail in there whatsoever. It just maps out the plan. The other thing is we're given a photo of turbines offshore. Okay, now in
Do you
that
have substations?
no substations.
They're recycling.
Surprise. But
Was it the
in
WA coast?
in that meeting, I asked Chris Bowen and Meryl Swanson, who are the Labor representatives of this government, to admit that having a photo as such was a misrepresentation and a skewed view on what they would look like. And they both agreed to that.
They both agree.
They both agreed. And then later on, Meryl Swanson came out. They completely agreed. So it was not the distance offshore that was supposed to be. Okay, what was ended up being, it was shorter. But they definitely agreed that if you stand in person and look out at something, it's very, very different to seeing something on the horizon in a photo. While we've had so much community engagement in what we're doing, these plans look to rip apart the very fabric of our society.
Yeah.
Our community is established, built, and thrives on tourism, fishing, and a beach culture and a coastal culture. Okay, so anecdotally, I've walked around nearly 60, 70 shops within Nelson Bay and surrounding areas. All but 2 people of business owners are vehemently opposed to it and concerned, not my words, but their words, concerned that their turnover will drop 15 to 20, 25%, and which would be the death knell of my area. And the socioeconomic concerns around that are really, really high.
So I guess it asks the question: what is the benefit to your community from having an offshore wind zone?
Yeah, and thank you. So none.
Yes, it's
So the general belief is that they want to put the zone there so they can power Tomago aluminium smelter.
okay.
And if it was so good and if it was so beneficial and if it was so great that the smelter is going to run, why have they just thrown $2 billion at 2 or 3 smelters in Australia?
Yeah.
Just to use their green energy. So number one there, but number two, they're promising 3,000 jobs, short-term jobs. And I know I work in construction. I've worked in the civil industry. I know those jobs will not be coming from our area.
Yeah.
We have jobs. I've got a job.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people in our area have a job.
Yeah.
And it's highly, highly specific and highly skilled stuff to go offshore and put these things in. There's not that many Boilermakers in the whole of Newcastle. I'm in touch with 3 large steel fabrication companies. They can't find Boilermakers. They can't find welders. They can't find guys to work with steel. How are we going to fill 3,000 positions? We're not. The general understanding is what will happen. They'll come from overseas. They'll put everyone else out of a house. Not everyone else out of a house, but they'll be displacing people out of a house, and it's bad enough, as we've heard already.
Yeah.
Well,
that's tourism, I'm guessing. So you know we've got a housing crisis as well. We have a few crises under this government, but there's a housing shortage. It's fair to say across the country.
Yes.
And there are people who obviously use holiday homes for Airbnbs. Tourists use those, particularly in beautiful coastal regions. If that's going to work as you sort of not getting that influx of tourists to come in and prop up your economy in that way, taking a salary, taking it back offshore with them.
The amount of tour boats in Nelson Bay and the amount of there's 3 marinas in through Port Stephens, full of boats, full of game fishing boats, full of boats that like to go out offshore.
Yeah.
Big boats. They're going to decline dramatically.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go offshore or to go around because it's just there's a zone that we know that they won't be able to get into. The proponents have told us you won't be able to fish within 50 metres of them, like Chris Bowen has said.
Wow.
You won't be able to get anywhere near them. Some of the proponents are saying an absolute definite would be 2 nautical miles. That's nearly 4 kilometres. 2 nautical miles. And even if you could fish amongst them, if you catch a marlin in there, so we're talking about a lot of marlin boats, it can run for 6, 12 hours.
Yeah.
The prawning industry in our area, huge. Okay, so we have royal red prawns that come out of Newcastle Harbour. No more prawning ever. No prawning for the next 20 or 40 years, ever. These things will be, the bases of these turbines will be located and we understand will be left on the ocean floor. 80% of flathead that end up in Sydney fish markets comes from specifically within that zone. Crustaceans, lobsters, everything that migrate and have been tagged coming from Tasmania end up north of us. They'll be going through there. We've already heard EMF is going to cripple them. Okay, the list goes on. There's 30 endemic species in that zone specifically to that area, and that looks to be wiped out. There's a lot of evidence from overseas that anywhere within about 3 to 4 nautical miles of a floating turbine area, the fish disappear. And this hasn't been heard. The fish absolutely disappear. There's nothing. It's dead, done. So even if you could get within 50 metres, there's nothing. The other thing they need to consider, there's an upwelling. So it doesn't have a name, but there's an upwelling within the zone itself where all the nutrients, so the East Coast current comes down and meets other cooler currents, and they combine down at the bottom of the canyon, and all this nutrient-rich water comes up and floods to the surface. Okay, so all the nutrients comes up. There's birds, there's baitfish, there's pelagic species, there's marlin, there's everything, there's tuna, that they congregate on the whole east coast of Australia. Everything sort of gets to focus there. That's why it's such a massive, massive boon of game fishing, marlin and the like.
I've got one very specific question, and I think it's a shorter answer. Do you think the consultation period as run to this point has given a social licence to build offshore wind?
No. Definitely not. There is no social licence. And as I stated before, the consultation, if you're going to consult with someone, do a town hall, send letters to people, make it actually happen. If council can do it on a shoestring budget, why can't a multi-billion-dollar industry get out there and actually listen to people?
Thank you so much. I'm struggling to see the benefit for your communities
Any other?
collectively.
And every time we've met with someone from the government, from you guys, they've said exactly the same thing when they presented with all the information. So why? That's the question.
What I can say is that I believe what we've done with a bias, but we've done the government's work for them. We've consulted with people. I regularly, and I'm talking hundreds of people now that I've asked, I've held up a brochure and I'll say, do you know about this? And they say, no, what is it? Or floating offshore turbines, they want to put up to 350 out there. And people are absolutely horrified that they want to put them 20 k's offshore and that many out there in such an amazing, amazing environment.
Well, thank you for all you have been doing, and thank you for all you are doing. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get a more formal meeting of the ENC meeting to do this. We'll keep fighting for that. The steps you've taken, crowdfunding to get here, all that stuff for no personal benefit. We appreciate what you do. Thanks for coming today, and we'll keep fighting. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators.